the heat of the mine cooked the meat, cooked the flesh, and it didn't, well, it would bleed, but not a lot of bleeding like you'd think might be. This is a model that my grandson made up as what our Jeep was like when we had in the Army. The Red Cross on front and stretchers on top. That's the last time I seen him, and he was killed.
Hey everyone, this is Rishi Sharma. As you guys might know, I'm on a mission to meet and interview every single World War II combat veteran, and today we have an incredible testimony for you guys. There is a World War II veteran in Bonnyville, Alberta named William McGregor. This man saw tons of action, and he definitely saved a lot of lives during his role as a medic with the Regimental Aid Post attached to the Essex Scottish Regiment. It is so important to make sure that the stories of people like Mr. McGregor are preserved forever. So if you want to help me in my mission, please consider donating at www.rememberww2.org. That way we can get as many of these heroes on camera forever, and they certainly deserve to live forever. I also want to tell you guys that Mr. McGregor has a very special birthday coming up, and it would mean the world to him if he got cards from you guys from across the world. So please consider sending him a happy birthday / thank you card. The cards can be sent to P.O. Box 6769 Bonnyville, Alberta 2N9H2H. Thank you, and God bless the World War II veterans.
And thank you so much to the Stanley W. Eskrim Foundation for their continued financial support.
Hello, my name is William McGregor, and we live in Bonnyville, Alberta. I was born in Northern Ireland, Moore, Northern Ireland, and at 2 years old, my family moved to Canada, and we settled at Vermilion on a farm there, but things were pretty hard times in the 30s. It was no price for the grain or whatever you grew, you couldn't sell it. I have a bill here for my dad had shipped 3 steers to Edmonton. They were 1,000 pounds each. And he got a bill back from the CNR Railroad for $6 freight. The steers didn't pay the freight. He still owed $6 for them. So that's how you know how low the prices were for cattle. John, my brother, he went first to the Army, and then later on Robert went. And then after that, the same year I went, in 42, I went to the Army. And we went overseas in July, I guess it was. I went overseas, and we, after training in Edmonton for 2 months, then went to Camp Borden in Ontario for two or three months, and we then went overseas. There wasn't too much place for soldiers to stay in England. It was so full of soldiers, Americans and all nationalities were in England there with the armies. In June of 44, we went to Europe and into Normandy. And then I was with the Essex Scottish. I was attached to the Essex Scottish, and we traveled all the way through to Germany. The main fighting was, the biggest battles was in Normandy, on the beaches and in the cities of Normandy, that they had lost so many people. The wounded was very high, and the dead was very high numbers. I was with the RAP, the Regimental Aid Post of the Essex Scottish, and there was a doctor there at the aid post, and there was a padre, the minister, the padre, he stayed with the doctor at the aid post too. And myself, and the rest of the people that was attached for putting up stuff or putting the tent up if we needed a tent to put our RAP in, it would be Essex Scottish people, soldiers. I had a Jeep. They gave us a Jeep and a driver, and my main job was picking up casualties at the front, mostly putting the first bandage on, but not always, and bringing them back as far as the RAP, where the doctor would check them, and then the bigger ambulance would be able to get there and take them further back to the hospital or wherever they had to go to. And in the early parts there, we were just had them to a clearing station, they called it, and then we were hauling them with the Jeep to the shore where there was barges coming in with more soldiers. And whenever the soldiers would get off, well, we would load on wounded soldiers, and they would be taken back out to the hospital ship that was out in the channel. The war in Normandy seemed to slacken up. The Germans pulled out or were killed, and we ended up in Dieppe, which was a city and town that the Essex Scottish had, in '42 had a big raid on, and they lost a lot of people. So they had a big graveyard there. So we stopped there for a day, and they had church service at the graveyard. And then they decided that they had to get a port to get more food in and ships, bigger ships in, because some of the ports that they had got were damaged so bad that they couldn't get ships into. And so the Essex Scottish Regiment was loaded on top of Churchill tanks. They were the British Churchill tanks. And they headed for Ostend in Belgium. And we went about 100 miles the first day because they didn't stop to fight. They just went. And if the Germans put up a fight, well, then the tanks would take care of that. And if not, they just passed everything and went. And we got to just outside of Ostend. And but I'll tell you, we were stopped on the side of the road in the evening, and there was lots of mines and that on the sides of the road, so you had to be really careful. But there was a lot of civilians that were leaving Ostend and coming out on the roads trying to get out into the country because they were scared there was going to be a lot of fighting in Ostend, and they might get killed. So, but this lady, one lady and two daughters were walking on the road, and with the tanks and big trucks and that on the road, they walked in the ditch, and she stepped on a mine, and it blew her foot off, and we happened to be right close there with our Jeep, so we attended to her and got her on the stretcher, and the two girls, and I took them back to where the doctor was, towards the back end of the convoy, and he looked them over and he said, the only thing, we have to get her to a hospital, and the hospital is over 100 miles back in France. So he said, there's a hospital 2 miles ahead, but you have to go through the German lines to get to it. And he said, you don't have to, but if you would do it, volunteer to do it, she would live to survive. Otherwise, if we put her off on the side of the road, she's going to die for sure. And so we said we would take her. And the driver and me, we had her on the stretcher on the Jeep, and we just started out for the hospital, and it only took us about 10 minutes or 15 minutes straight down the road, 2 miles. And we didn't see any Germans. They probably seen us, but we didn't see them. And we went right into the hospital and give her over to the doctors. And they took care of them, but they asked us to stay and have supper with them. And we did. And then they said, well, it was already dark then, and we couldn't go back to our unit because we would probably be seen by the Germans, and it's hard to say if they would shoot at us or what. So we thought we'd stay till they caught up to us in the morning, and they would be coming in the morning. So they give us a bed, and after supper they give us a bed and a bath. They said you could have a bath, and it was so nice to have a good bath. And but the next morning we woke up, and here all our clothes had been washed and ironed and nice and clean, stacked beside the bed. The nurses had done that during the night while we were asleep, and it was very nice. But we had breakfast, and then shortly after that we went to look for where the RAP of the Essex had been set up. We didn't know where it was, and we didn't have phones like you got now, that you could phone. You just had to look for signs, and we just went to the main road, and we did see a sign where to go, and we followed it. And we had Christmas in Antwerp, and after Christmas they started to move towards Germany more, and they finally, in February or so, they were right at the borders. And that's where I met my brother there. He was with the Calgary Highlanders, and he had been wounded in France, but he went back to England and got better, and he got better, and they sent him back to his unit, the Calgary Highlanders, and they were marching up the road or walking up the road, moving in to take over from the Essex, which had been fighting all night and trying to get through the German lines, but hadn't succeeded. It was in this big forest area along the Rhine River. But John come along the road, and he seen the Essex sign on the side of the road, so he stopped to see if I was in there, and I was. I was sitting on a stretcher and inside the tent, and we talked about for 15 minutes or so. And he told me about getting married in England, but he went on to. He said, "Oh, I got to hurry up and get back to my platoon. They're still going." So he was behind. So they off on the run he had a Bren gun over his shoulder, and a soldier with him to carry an ammunition, boxes of ammunition. And that's the last time I seen him. And he was killed. John got killed about 2 days later in crossing, trying to get through the Siegfried line and into Germany. But I didn't hear about it or know about it till about a month later, or over a month later. My sister had wrote me from Canada that they had got a telegram from the Department of Defense saying that he had been killed in action in Germany. So he must have been into Germany before he got killed. But that's the way we found out about it.
What was that like when you got that letter that John had been killed?
Well, you were very, very sad, of course, to hear it, but I mean, you're so busy and so gone, and so many people get wounded and you're taking care of them. It seems your mind just can't think of one thing at a time, you're just going. John was quite a quiet guy. He didn't, there was not much fuss. He did learn to play the bagpipes with the Calgary Highlanders, and he did play them sometimes. But at some of their parades and that they had. In England, they had a parade, well, they might play the bagpipes there. Typical farm boy. He's raised on the farm, and he didn't go out much. He didn't dance much or go to dances very much. We went to some parties and that, but he was quite quiet. He just liked to more or less sit down with a book and read and be alone. He wasn't one to play games much. We did play ball, softball, and some other games that we played with the group in Sandy Rapids, but nothing professional, just for fun.
And Mr. McGregor, if John had survived the war, what do you think he would have ended up doing with his life?
Oh. I imagine that he would have got a farm through Veterans Affairs. They were given some money to get farms, and for veterans could get loans from Veterans Affairs, and you could buy a farm. I imagine John and his wife would have settled on a farm, but it's hard to say. With a different partner, she may have wanted to go to a city or town, so this is very hard to say what you'd end up doing.
And how old was he when he was killed?
He was 24. His wife eventually came out to Canada and stayed for about a year, and then she decided to go back to England, and her and the girl went back to England. And but they came out a couple of times later, after the girl was grown up to about 10 or 11 years old. They came out the last time they were out there. She was about 10 or 11 years old, and just visited for a month and so, and then went back to England again. He had a very nice daughter. She was very intelligent and looked a very good looking girl. His wife never married again. She just stayed in England and settled there.
Did John ever get to meet his daughter?
No, he never seen his daughter. He was killed before she was born.
Can you please tell me about some of the casualties you saw?
You name it and you saw it. It could be anything, you know, lose the arms, lose the legs, and shot in the body or in the shoulders, and just different places, so many different places. Had one experience with, we were driving up a laneway with the Jeep going towards the front lines, and there was a soldier laying in the ditch. At first I thought he was dead, you know, but then we stopped and I rolled him over and he was still alive. But he had been hit by a piece of a mortar shell, and it just tore his insides right out, just about. And he had dragged himself through the ditch there, and it was all dirt and mud and blood. But anyway, we put him on the Jeep, on the stretcher, and got him on the Jeep and took him back to the doctor. And we left him there, so. But anyway, he was able to talk a little bit. He was calling for his mother, and after he was with the doctor, then the doctor said, put him in the shade, you know, and I put him putting him in the shade, and he kept saying, don't leave me, don't leave me, but you have to leave him, you know. But he died there, of course. The ambulance wasn't in to take him any further, and the doctor said there was no use. He was too far gone to try to go out with a Jeep with him, you know. But things like that happen, and doctor said to us one time, I was asking about what happened to this guy or that guy that we brought in, you know, if he's still alive or did he die? And he said, you just think about today, what happened yesterday. Think about what happened yesterday, forget about it. You done your best, think about today, you know. That was his theory, you know. You had to think about today, not what happened yesterday, because you done your best. You know. So that was the motive there. You do what you can.
I really appreciate you opening up and sharing that story, sir. I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Oh, it's not one, but it was many. Many, many, many casualties we hauled.
Is there anything that you found out about the soldier, who he was, or?
No, I never found. You can't. You know, it's just too much. You can't start following one person. That's what the doctor meant. What happened yesterday, forget about it. It's today we're worried about. Yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah.
And you know, your job as a medic, you know, can you tell us the difference between what you were doing and what the aid man attached to the company would be doing? You know, because
yeah, well, he'd be doing similar, only we were evacuating them. We were getting them on the stretcher and getting them out. But sometimes we were putting on bandages too, you know, if it was more than, if there was only one or two, maybe he had them bandaged, you know. But then we'd just pick them up and take them out. But if there's more, you know, or, it's hard to say. Or if he was hurt, you know, then you end up helping. Do what you can.
you had told us that, you know, you've seen all sorts of injuries, wounds. For the soldiers, you know, who had a leg or an arm blown off, you know, how would you treat that? What would you do, sir?
Well, you have to put a tourniquet on to stop the bleeding as quick as you could. If it was blown off with a mine, like a foot blown off or something like that, there was very little bleeding, because the heat of the mine cooked the meat, cooked the flesh, and it didn't, well, it would bleed, but not a lot of bleeding like you'd think might be, because of the heat of the mine would cook it. And as the flesh was cooked, well, it wouldn't bleed so much. If you can imagine that. It's hard to. But you had to be careful, because if you try to put a bandage on one that had been blown off, you'd pull the flesh away from the bone. It would leave the bone, you know, quite easy, because it's cooked. It's just like putting a roast in the oven.
Could you describe the RAP? What would it look like, the whole setup, sir? Was it a tent?
Sometimes it was a tent, but we tried to get into a building where they could. They had a big truck, must have been 3-ton truck, would hold all the equipment, you know, from the RP. And the doctor had a Jeep, and the padre used to live with the doctor, stay with the doctor most of the time. And it'd be him, and they would have a driver, of course. And I don't know, they just moved. I don't know how I wasn't planning where they went, you know, somebody else did that. But anyway, they stopped, and wherever they stopped, we stopped. And that was our place they were going to set up. And mainly they just they had a table, and then they had a place where you could set stretchers on, kind of a steel frame. And you could set a stretcher on, the doctor could look at the wounded, and very little. You're moving it, you know. And he wasn't going to do much operating or anything on him, but just to see it wasn't bleeding too much, you know. Try to stop the bleeding, that was the main thing. Because if they lose the blood, well, what do you got, you know? Nothing. Mostly stayed at the RAP, you know, wherever they were, and then say a call would come in, B companies having heavy casualties, you know, or V company's going to advance on the part of the town, and there will be casualties, and then you would have to get up in there and pick up the casualties as they would come. But
how many would you be able to carry at a time?
We could put on 3 stretcher cases, 2 on top, and 1 where the passenger sits, you know, would go back to the back seat. You see the way they put the metal frame up on the Jeep to hold 3 stretchers. And then I usually stood up in the middle, because especially at night, if it was dark, you couldn't put lights on. There's no lights, because the road might be shell holes in the road, so you had to. I stood up on the middle of the Jeep and held on to the front windshield, but there was no glass in the windshield, there was just a frame there. And I could see straight down onto the road better than the driver could. And you could hope you weren't going to drive into a shell hole. And at night was really bad. Well, I have walked alongside the Jeep to try to make sure he didn't drive into a shell hole. My hand on the fender, and just walk beside him to make sure he got out of the place we were getting him out. Maybe not all the way, but, you know, to part of the way where it was been heavily shelled or something. You had never been on these roads before, so you were trying to get out. There's all new laneways, maybe in a road or in a town, you know, and it's you have to figure out where you're going. Same as in London, or same as in where we were staying. Were in Horsham there, people didn't have no lights in the house, you know. They had lights, but their blinds were black. so there was no light getting out. You know, at the house. In Holland, we were coming up a street just with a Jeep, just coming up, not going any place in particular, just going. And this Dutch man, he opened the door and waved at us, and we stopped, and he waved to come in, and I went in, and there was a German officer laying on the floor with his, he'd been shot through the upper part of the leg here. And so we bandaged him a little bit, and they had been bandaged by the Dutch guy, had cut his pants down and had put a towel in there on the wound and that, but I put a bandage on it anyway. And we put him on the stretcher, and we took him back because we wasn't that busy. We were more or less just looking for work. But anyway, he had a revolver on him with a holster and belt and all, and I took that off and I threw it under the Jeep, the back seat of the Jeep you could lift up, and I threw that under there, and I kind of forgot about it, but after a month or so, I was cleaning the Jeep or something and lifted the seat, and here this revolver was still there, and I took it to my kit bag and put it in, and I brought it home with me. There was a Luger 9mm Luger. Things like that. Same as I brought home a nice pair of binoculars that I scrounged out of a submarine. When we were taking people out of the submarine, well, these were in the captain's room. And so I picked them up and brought them home.
Thank you for sharing that. Could you please tell us about the Red Cross? How prominent was the Red Cross on your uniform and on the Jeep?
Well, they had the Red Cross was on the hood of the Jeep, and was on the both sides were smaller Red Cross. See, there's no doors on the Jeep. The Jeep didn't have doors. You could just jump in and out quick.
And what about your uniform?
And we had Red Cross on her arm. Her arm was Red Cross, her arms. Just the common Red Cross that you would see. And
did you feel like that protected you? I've heard stories of Germans picking off medics.
They did too, but I don't know if it protected you or not. I don't. You wore it because you're supposed to wear it, so. Yeah, you had a Red Cross on your helmet too, on the front of your helmet and the back. Yes, many times we were under shell fire, you know, but I lost one driver from shell fire, and it was, we were driving on a road going up towards the front, and all of a sudden the mortar shell dropped in front of us, and then one behind us, and then another one in front or close to, and the Jeep got hit. Some pieces went through the radiator of the Jeep, and I went in one ditch and he went in the other. And after the shelling was over, they had a few more mortar shells dropped, but not really close, and it was over. I got up out of my ditch and went, and he had been hit and killed. And his had come too close and it blew right up. So the Jeep was out of order. So I don't remember how I got back, but whether somebody picked me up or I got back, but I got back to the RAP, and we got another driver shortly and another Jeep. But that was, and he was killed. I don't know. I didn't, I don't remember how I got back. It just is so much confusion. I don't remember how I got back. Whether I walked back or run back or somebody picked us up or what happened, but it just happened. My mind went blank, I guess. We picked up wounded that's been hit with snipers, all right, but I don't think I've ever had them shooting at me. I'm not sure about that, but I don't think so.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McGregor, but as a medic, you don't carry weapons, right?
No. No, as a medic, we didn't carry weapons. The driver was allowed to have a Sten gun, and but we didn't carry weapons in the Jeep whenever we were out.
Did you feel vulnerable? A lot of the men who I interview, they say that when you're in combat, if you don't have your rifle and if you don't have a helmet, you feel like you're naked.
Well, that's probably so, yeah. I mean, what good would a rifle done me anyway if I had one, you know? I mean, sure, maybe you could have shot somebody that was already wounded, shot him again, but I mean, that's, I don't know. I never missed it. Didn't feel anything wrong with it, not having it.
Well, you were just called for something else. I mean, your job was to save lives, right?
Yeah,
not
right.
take them.
Yeah, not take them. So if you didn't have a rifle, well, you didn't have a rifle.
So when you guys would go to pick up the wounded, would the riflemen, would they have carried the wounded to a place to make it easy for you to go pick them up, or are you picking them up where they were wounded?
Both, but the men were always good to help you load the stretcher on the Jeep and help in any way they could if they were there, not just to happen to be standing behind a building or something, you know. And I'm sure that at times they drug, you know, wounded to say you got hit on the road and they drag you in behind a building or something to save you. It's to find out the war was over was a great. I thought we'd be going home. You know, the war's over. We're going to go home. But what happened is we didn't go home. I was sent back to my unit after a few days. They got the thing signed and everything, and I went back to my unit, and then I was expecting to go home because there was some of the other guys were already leaving to go home. But the doctor come along, one of the doctors, I had known him because he had been up to our RAP to relieve our doctor and let him out for a rest. And I did know this doctor. And he said, "You're coming with me, and we're going out we have to go with the British Marines out to the North Frisian Islands because German submarine base there, and they're surrendering. They haven't surrendered yet, but they're going to surrender. They hope to surrender to these British Marines when they get there." So we went. I went with him, and I was out there 6 months at the Frisian Islands before I got word that I could go home, and then I went back to back to Belgium, and then we went back to England, and then we got home on it was just before Christmas I got home. So I was out in there for about 6 months but these submarines were coming in every day, so there were submarines coming in every day, and some of them had sick people in the submarine. So their main crew would be taken off the submarine, and their submarine, the British soldiers and myself mostly would go down into the submarine and see these were people that got a disease called Bang's disease, and they couldn't walk, but there wasn't really much wrong with them, but only they couldn't stand up. And we had to take them out on a stretcher, and it's hard to get somebody out of a submarine on a stretcher. You have to go straight up pretty well. But we had lots of help, so we worked at that for a couple of months. There were submarines coming in. And then whenever they got the people unloaded, the British just towed the submarine out into the ocean, fired a shot through it, and let it sink. And I guess the crew was sent back to Germany then. But I got home for Christmas anyway. And then later on, we went back and then got discharged from the army.
Could you please tell us about seeing your family for the very first time?
Oh.
Could you paint that picture, Mr. McGregor?
Well, first time I got discharged in Calgary, and I came to Edmonton on the train, and then I came out to from the train. I caught a ride with a man that hauled the mail out to Iron River, and he was hauling the mail with team of horses. Team of horses in the winter time, and the road wasn't open for cars, so he hauled with a team of horses, and he gave me a ride as far as Iron River, and then the mailman at Iron River picked me up and went on to Sandy Rapids with the mail, and I stopped at his place and went in and had supper with them. And then he said after supper he'd take me home with a sleigh and team of horses. So he took me home, and I just walked to the door, and my sister opened the door and there I was. And they didn't know I was coming, but I was there, and of course the hugs and laughs. That all went with it. Oh yeah, and then, well, of course she hollered, "Hey, Willie's home, Willie's home," and my mother and father talked to them right away, and of course you had hugs and kisses and glad to see you. My brother was home already, the one that was in Italy. He had come home, and he was there sitting on the chair too, so Robert. So he had been sent home already, so, and I don't know, life just seemed to start to go on normal after that for a while. Oh, there was a lot of sadness, of course, in the home because John didn't get back with us, and he had been killed. But they had been in contact with John's wife, and by that time she had a baby girl, and she said she was coming to Canada, so there was something to look forward to. And I don't know, life seemed to go on. didn't dwell on it too much, because what could you do? It went, and wake up at night, sweat and sleep, just. Wife would say, "Get back in bed here." But, I don't know. You got over it a little bit, but you never will get really over it. But you do get better.
What advice do you want to give to future generations? Like your grandkids, your great-grandkids, your great-great-grandkids? You're 101, you have a lot of wisdom. What's something you want them to know for their life, sir?
Yeah. Put good politicians into the government so we wouldn't have wars. They could settle them without wars. War doesn't settle nothing. It just kills a lot of people. That's my advice to them. This is a model that my grandson made up as what our Jeep was like when we had in the Army. The Red Cross on front and stretchers on top.
Thank you so much.
This is my brother John. He was killed in war. He was killed in Germany during the war.
How old was he?
He was 24 years old. This is a photograph of me. This was taken in Antwerp during the war. We had time off there in Antwerp. We had a few days that we were kind of on. We had time off, so we went and had a picture taken.
All right, and if you, yeah. And just give me a big smile.
Yeah.